Dee Dee Cummings, and I'm a longtime festival volunteer. This is my 13th year, and the festival's 13th year. We have a set of lost keys, if anyone needs them, found at the Center Congregational Church. Also, Jerry, our wonderful, the director here at the library, just said if you have questions, there's a handheld mic we'll pass around at the end. It's a real honor to be here, but I have a few other details just to quickly go through. Our festival, the Brattleboro Literary Festival, is presented by the Downtown Alliance, and it is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, Marlborough College, the Vermont Humanities Council, and Vermont Public Radio. We would also like to thank our advertisers and encourage you to visit their establishments. Spend a lot of money, it's always good. The festival is run entirely by volunteers, speaking of money, but has very real expenses. So we encourage you to make a donation in one of the donation boxes. Thank you. You can also donate online, and we have a tab that says Donate Now. There's no photography or recording except for our wonderful BCTV and our fabulous event photographer, Beowulf Sheehan. So that's all for the photography. And if you would kindly shut off your cell phones, we would be so happy. Or the ringer, it's fine. And we also have evaluation forms. It would be wonderful to just take a minute and give us some feedback so we can do well. And Jerry just waved them back. They're orange forms right in the back. Last summer, I had the honor of teaching a course at the first annual Bread Loaf Orion Environmental Writing Conference. And I heard Rick read. And I came back here and got together with Sandy Rouse. And Sandy and I love to talk books. And we sat at the Works on Main Street, and I said, Sandy, we've got to get Rick Bass here. And Sandy said, I know, in her Texas beautiful voice. So he's here. I sent him an email, and I said, you may not remember me, but I was in the audience at Bread Loaf. So I'm going to introduce my colleague at Green Writers Press, Robin MacArthur, because we love Rick Bass's writing, and Robin has a very short thing to read for you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I'm honored to introduce one of my all-time favorite writers, Rick Bass. Born in Fort Worth, Texas, Rick began writing short stories on his lunch breaks while working as a petroleum geologist. He then moved to Montana, where he not only went on to write 16 works of nonfiction, 4 novels, 5 collections of short stories, and 4 novellas, but became an environmental activist working to protect his region from roads and logging. He has received O. Henry Awards, numerous Pushcart Prizes, awards from the Texas Institute of Letters, and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lyndhurst Foundation, and the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters. He has had numerous stories anthologized in Best American Short Stories, and his nonfiction has been anthologized in Best American Spiritual Writing, Best Spiritual Writing, Best American Travel Writing, and Best American Science Writing. His books have been named New York Times and Los Angeles Times Notable and Best Books of the Year. His short story collection, The Lives of Rocks, was a finalist for the Story Prize, as well as a Best Book of the Year by the Rocky Mountain News. His most recent nonfiction book, Why I Came West, was a finalist for a National Book Critics Circle Award. I first read Rick's collection, The Watch, when I was in graduate school, and it immediately became a beacon for me for how to write eloquently and powerfully about our human connection with the natural world and our need for wildness in its variant forms. Since then, I've fallen in love again and again with his other stories and books. As a writer and editor, I'm constantly thinking about the role of fiction, how it has, like all art, the potential to radically shift our values and affect the way we think about our place in the ecosystem. Rick Bass is a role model supreme for such writing. His lyrical, tender, and honest stories, be they fiction or nonfiction, reverberate with heart, necessity, and truth as they authentically investigate the boundary waters between human and natural worlds. I can think of no better thing to do with one's life than write such things. Please welcome Rick Bass.
A lovely introduction, thank you. And if you don't mind me, it doesn't matter, I'm going to do it anyway. I hope you don't mind me saying that you said that you had not done introductions before and that you were nervous, and I didn't know why, but you've got like a public radio voice. That was awesome. It just bugs me. If that's your nervous voice, I don't know what your calm voice is. And thank you for the kind work on introductions. They are hard. I get nervous when I have to do them. I don't like doing them because you put work into them as a creative writer, and then you put it out there, and then it's over, never again to be. It's kind of like, I won't use the word waste, but thank you. No, the work is appreciated. And speaking of work, thanks to the whole festival for having me here. Dee Dee, who said, you might not remember me. People remember Dee Dee. And I was happy to do so in the context of this festival. Yeah, thanks for having me out here, and Sandy and Jenny and all of the folks who did all the logistics. I want to thank all of y'all in Vermont for taking care of my youngest daughter, Lowry, who is going to school out here. So it's like, I kind of halfway want y'all to say, go back to Montana, kid, but I was so really grateful for everybody being so kind to her out here, and just having a great time. I think along those lines, I may read a very short story set in the East, and then a pretty short story set in the West. Despite the distance, I feel an affinity, regardless of Lowry's residency here right now, between Montana and Vermont, where we've got that northern tier stuff going on, and this yellow leaf thing going on right before the snow comes, and the gray clouds and ice and unhappiness. So it feels not like home, but it feels familiar. And thank y'all for being in, supporting books in this great festival, and especially on the loveliest Sunday afternoon in the history of mankind. Y'all are hardcore. I appreciate that. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, great. We're going to read a very short piece called Eating. Robin, it was very kind of you to not get into the eco-bore thing that I do, the scold of the environmentalist. None of that's going to be present. I'm just going to read some fiction tonight. Happy to answer questions about the eco-bore stuff. But in rereading this story about eating, I think there may be some allegory going on about our consumptive desires and the weight upon the earth, etc. But I didn't realize that until after I wrote it. Sometime before dawn, on their first date, driving north through North Carolina to go canoeing in the mountains, they hit an owl. Sissy was sitting up, leaning against Russell's shoulder, and they had been listening to the radio, not speaking, benumbed by the lateness of the hour and the endless roll of road beneath. They saw the underside of the owl flare up, brilliant white in the glare of the headlights. It swooped right at their faces, barely missing the windshield. And then there was half an instant of silence, so that they thought they had missed it. It was a great horned owl, and seemed as large and incongruous to the night sky in that brief moment as a flying man. But then they heard and felt the thump of the large body striking the canoe, and a few feathers swirled past their windshield. And after slowing and looking back, not seeing it, they drove on, remorseful, saddened. Maybe he made it, Russell said. They followed narrow, winding mountain roads that hugged steep cliffs and the edges of rivers from which rose ribbons of steam. They drove slower and slower and saw more and more owls, passing through them as if through a nighttime hatch of immense moths, though they didn't strike anymore. They were still in North Carolina when the sun came up, burning orange-red through the fog, and they stopped for breakfast at a small diner that had a smokehouse attached to its side, through the wood-slat cracks of which issued slow blue smoke. The scent of the smoke caught their attention as if a clothesline had been strung across the road. The diner was built from old cinder blocks, and the parking lot was red clay with scattered beds of gravel. Numerous low swales held muddy water. The lot was filled with old mud-splattered trucks and cars, bald-tired and with sprung-out taillights and headlights duct-taped in place. All of the license plates were local, and none of the vehicles had bumper stickers of any kind, as if the drivers led lives so pure as to be unconcerned of anything beyond their immediate control. Russell and Sissy went out back first to take a look at what was cooking. They found glistening pork ribs and ham steaks blushing as red as oak leaves in autumn. Some chickens, too. "I'm hungry," Russell said. They stood there in the blue smoke, letting it bathe them for a while, and looked out at the forest dropping away below them. Sweet gum, hickory, oak, loblolly, mountain laurel. They could see more ridges, more knolls and valleys, gold-lit through the framework of green leaves and branches. Tobacco country down in the lowlands. Russell took another look at the hams. "This is my country," he said. "We're getting real near it." He turned and studied the mound of fresh split oak sitting next to the grill. Fuel for the coming day's work of altering the taste of a thing. He didn't possess a trace of fat. It would be hard to guess where the calories went on him. It was his own opinion that they just sort of vaporized, like coal or some other combustible shoved into a glowing furnace. When they went inside, the diners all swiveled to study them unabashedly and at length. Sissy had never felt so on display. Old farmers in blue denim overalls and straw hats staring at her through Coke bottle glasses. Canes, gap teeth, gold teeth, tobacco teeth. Finally, Sissy felt compelled to speak. "Hello," she said. One of the old farmers gestured the nub of a finger toward Russell and then toward their car and toward the canoe perched atop it. "Son," he said, "what are you doing with that owl?" They looked out the window and saw that an owl, bent-looking and ruffled, was sitting on the hood of their car, blinking. It had gotten sucked up into the canoe, and Russell had been driving so fast it must have ridden, pinned back in the stern, unable to get out. Now that the car had stopped and the pressure had been released, the owl seemed scarcely able to believe it was free. "Can it fly?" one of the old men asked. Others were staring at Russell now. "We must have scooped it out of the sky," Russell said. Only about half of them believed him. They set their papers down and sipped their coffee and watched the owl with interest and speculation. "It seems disinclined to fly," one of the men said. "It's watching us back," said another. And now it seemed as if a gauntlet had been laid down, so that there was no way the old men would let the owl, this ruffled, yellow-eyed interloper, outstare them, and they crouched forward, leaning over their steaming cups of coffee, and surveyed the owl, which was still squatting in similar fashion, hunch-shouldered, as suspicious of the events that had brought him to this place as were the old men. Sissy and Russell settled in to eat. Road-weary and ravenous, they settled slowly, firmly, back into the real world. Russell could not decide what to exclude from the menu, so he ordered one of everything. Pancakes, grits, ham, fried eggs, ribs, bacon, biscuits, gravy. And as if to counterbalance his gluttony, Sissy ordered a cup of coffee and a thin piece of ham. They ate in silence. A slash of morning sunlight fell across their table, and after so much darkness on their drive through the night, the sunlight seemed now to carry extra sweetness and clarity. Russell finished his first helpings and decided to focus thereafter on the fried eggs and ham. The waitress brought him another plate, and he stretched. The cracking of tight ligaments in his back sounded almost musical. And he told the waitress she better just start frying eggs and that he'd tell her when to stop. One of the old men noticed the new plate of food and marked a little tally of it on his napkin. Russell ate steadily for over an hour. 2 eggs, ham, 2 eggs, ham. The restaurant ran out of eggs after eating 24, though still they had some ribs and ham left. But finally, Russell said he had had enough, and he leaned back and stretched and patted, then thumped the taut skin of his belly. He reached out and took Sissy's hand fondly, and they sat there for a while alongside the old men in the mild sunlight and watched the owl. "It wants in to eat some ham too," one of them speculated. "If a cat walks by, that owl will kill it," another warned. And now they began to look about almost eagerly, hoping for such drama. As if bored by not eating, Russell decided to order a single pancake for dessert. And when it arrived, he doused it with syrup and then ate it slowly with much satisfaction and said, "Damn, I wish I had an egg to go on top of this." Russell finished and then got up to go to the bathroom. The waitress got on the phone and began ordering reinforcements for the larder. Sissy noticed that the phone was an old black rotary dial and felt again that they had driven into the past. The old men asked Sissy where they were from, and when Sissy said, "Mississippi," the old men looked slightly troubled, as if concerned that there might be more coming just like them. Invaders, insatiable infidels, a population of marauders who might devour the entire town. In the bathroom, Russell settled in on the toilet and stared out the open window at the garden beyond. The lace curtains fluttered in the morning breeze. As Russell was gazing, a mule's enormous head appeared from out of nowhere, startling him considerably. The mule looked as if he had come to inspect something, and not knowing what the mule wanted, Russell handed him one end of the roll of toilet paper, which the mule took in his enormous teeth, and then walked away carefully, gently, drawing the toilet paper out in a steady unspooling. Russell watched, mesmerized, as the mule wandered randomly around the garden and through the field and then around the corner, around toward the front of the restaurant, as if laying down the borders of some newly claimed territory. And it was not until the spool of paper was nearly unwound that Russell had the presence of mind to snap it off and save some. When he emerged, the old men and the waitress were staring at him as if wondering what he might do next. And he and Sissy went out and began gathering the toilet paper, even as the mule now moved along behind them, grazing on the paper. At first, the owl would not let them near their car, hissing and snapping at them. But Russell got a branch and was able to dislodge it. They watched as it launched itself, hale and hearty, into silent flight and disappeared, a hunter, into the woods. They waved goodbye to the old men and the waitress and drove off. And as they were leaving the parking lot, they saw another truck turning in, a beat-up old red truck carrying in the back of it a single immense hog, which looked none too excited about the journey, as if knowing, maybe from the odor of the smokehouse, what stage of life's journey he was now entering. "Are you always like this?" Sissy asked as they drove on farther, deeper into the mountains, anticipating the day. "Like what?" Russell asked. Thank you. Read a story from Montana called Shoto. I've done a lot of teaching in the years since I wrote this story, and it always strikes me the hypocrisy of the things I tell students, like don't do this, don't do that, and then I realize that I've done those things in this story. I don't apologize for it, it just doesn't seem fair. Well, thank you so much. Like, if I was there's not a prison in Shoto, even though the story says there is, and I just didn't know any better. And there's something else wrong with the story, I can't remember what, but I guess I should tell you anyways, no need. Galena Tom Aunts has 2 girlfriends and a key to Canada. It's the best hunting in North America, up the road, past the entry gate where he has this key. The tiny dirt road going into Canada hugs a mountain face on one side and the sheerest of cliffs on the other. Driving it, if you dare, you can look down and see the nauseating white spills of rapids in the Moyi River. There's not a dead-end sign or anything to warn you when you first get on this road, and you follow it straight up the mountain, around a few bends then, as if climbing into the clouds. Always you keep going up, and the smart people who somehow find themselves on this road will stop and park and get out and walk if they want to see what's ahead. No place to turn around. You have to suck in your breath and back down, stopping to throw up sometimes. The Jeep or truck slides when you tap the brakes, rolls on the loose gravel, acts as if it's going to take you over the edge and into space beyond. Sometimes it does, and you can see wreckage on the rocks below. But Galena Tom guns his old black truck up the road without a care, and when he gets to the heavy crossbar gate with a padlock on it, no sign differentiating the United States from Canada, just a gate, he gets out and opens it with his key, and we drive through, and then he gets out again and locks it behind us, and we've left northern Idaho and are in a new country, pioneers it seems, hunting in a country that has never been hunted. "We," says Tom, grinning. He's got black hair, an old line-looking face, he's 40, and light blue eyes, a kid's grin. We. It's the only French he knows. He loves to hunt. I don't know how he got the key. Some sort of charm or guile somewhere, I'm sure. People only see that side of him. Though surely Nancy, who has been his girlfriend ever since she left Oklahoma with him, sees the other part. I do too. He is still a boy, still learning to be a man, this in the 40th year of his life. He doesn't always make the right choices, but he's still trying. He still has choices to make, at least. An odd, stubborn sort of purity. I like Nancy. She's 40 also. I'm not so wild about the girlfriend Tom keeps in Libby. The girl is 16, has yellow hair, and is a hard talker, ready to get out of the sticks, ready to go out on the road. Except she's frightened, I think, and wants Tom to go with her, which he won't, of course. But he's got that choice. He still has so many. And who wouldn't want to have Tom aunts, Galena Tommy aunts, on the road with him that first time? Everyone else sees just the boy in him and is charmed, says, "That Tom," etc., chuckles, buys him a drink or what have you, and they think that that's how he is, that he's a wild man, the wild man of Yak Valley, and are glad to have him, a legend living among them like a damn motto or state flag or something. They don't understand that he's still growing up, that he's just getting rid of things and trying to keep other things out. They called him Galena because of what he did to the road when he first moved up here, back when he and Nancy were about to get married. They never did. It was about 10 years ago, and they just made the big strike down near Thompson Falls. Galena is usually found as an ore mixed in with what they call country rock, and all sorts of processing and smashing and refining is necessary to separate it. But occasionally, a vein of blue, glittering, space blue, slick and shiny, heavy as lead galena will be discovered, and they can claw that directly out of the mountain with a bulldozer. Tom had left the rodeo circuit, had come north. Most of the people living in the Yak then, as well as now, were from Texas, but Tom was from Oklahoma, a little farther north. The country was and still is too tough for anyone else. It was when they were first putting a real road in through the valley, the last valley in the Rockies before you get up into Canada. And it's still the last valley in Montana without electricity, and probably always will be. And Tom was working on the road crew, helping cut and blade through rock and forest the one-lane road which follows the Yak River, which flows west into the Kootenai. What Tom did was to steal a cement mixing truck from the road crew project, late on a Friday afternoon, after everyone had gone home. Tom was the only crew member who actually lived in the valley. All the others had gone home to Libby or Bonner's Ferry or even Eureka. And he took it back down to Thompson Falls with me and Nancy along for company. And he backed it up to the roadside cut where they were mining all of this galena straight from the vein. He climbed up on top of the mixer so that he was right against the cliff, and with a hammer and railroad spike he chiseled into the vein, spilling pebble and cobble and fist-sized pieces of galena down into the cement mixer's huge bowl. We held flashlights for him so that he could see, and whenever a lone car or truck would come driving down the road, we'd turn the flashlights off and hold our breath. Tom would keep chipping, though, banging away at the side of the mountain with savage, rooting swings, as if there was something buried beneath the galena. It was a dark night, with the moon not up yet, But the galena was so shiny that it caught even the starlight, and Tom looked wild up there in the dark, his big arms and shoulders working frantically. And when he finally had the mixer loaded the way he wanted it, half and half, it was about midnight. He climbed down, too tired to drive, and Nancy drove us back to Yak, taking dirt roads, going up through canyons, cutting across meadows, taking all the shortcuts, skipping the few little towns between Thompson Falls and Yak. We got stuck in the last meadow outside of the valley, coming up along a dry little beaver dam creek, and we had to dump some of the galena and cement to lighten our load. By that time, the moon was up over the mountains, and it seemed unnatural, wrong, too bright. And as the galena splashed into the little shallow creek, making a dam, it sparkled with an eerie blue light that seemed almost to come from within, like some beautiful new electrified form of life, maybe even life being created inside the mixer. We got the big truck going again and drove, sliding and groaning, all the way up through the pasture like that, leaving a wide trail of galena as if some beautiful animal had been wounded and was leaving a glowing blue spore. When we got back out to the road, Tom hopped out and shut the sluice pipe, and no more galena was lost. But it's still out there, 100-yard stripe of it, and hunters call it Galena Meadows now instead of the old name, which was forgotten. And that's even how it shows up on the maps. And it's beautiful in the moonlight, shining in the night like an electric blue blaze. Helicopters land on it whenever they have to fly into the valley to pick up an emergency patient because it's so easy to see even in bad weather. The meadow is the safest place to land, and they aim for the galena, illuminated by their landing lights, shimmering, almost pulsing as the winds blow snow across it. What Tom did next was pretty self-incriminating. He drove down the sidewalks of the little town of Yak, a mercantile on one side of the street and the Dirty Shame Saloon and a few houses on the other side. And with the cement mixer growling and tumbling, sloshing all that mixture around inside, lights coming on from the cabins along the road, he poured galena sidewalks for the town on either side of the new road that was coming through. And when he was finished with that, he drove around and around in circles in the center of town, pouring a town plaza right in the middle of where the road would be coming, so that it would have to fork left and right around this slick blue circle. And Dickie McIntyre, the owner of the saloon, came out and with a snowplow on his truck graded and leveled both the sidewalks and the little plaza circle. And by the time the sun was coming up, the men of Yak were building a gazebo out of lodge poles in the center of the large blue circle. And Tom and Nancy and I had returned the cement mixer and gone home and were sleeping hard. There aren't but 20 or so people living in the valley, and we all liked the new sidewalks and the new plaza, and felt they were at least what the road crew owed us for the inconvenience of the new road and the people it would bring. And so no one said anything on Tom, although he had poured a little strip of the galena mixture all the way up to his cabin before returning the mixture. And then, even after the crew started back to work on the road, working for several more weeks, bits and chunks of galena were still falling out of the shaker, being poured out into the new road. And now, at night, in places all along the new Yak River Road, your car or truck headlights will pick up sudden, flashing blue bolt chunks and swatches in the road, blazing like blue eyes, sunk down in the road. The whole road glittering and bouncing with that weird blue galena light if you're driving fast. Tom says you need 2 of everything up here. Winters hit 40, sometimes 50 below, and the air as still as your sleep. 2 trucks, 2 chainsaws, 2 girlfriends, says Tom. 2 axes, 2 winches, 2 sets of snow chains. Mauls, generators, cross-country skis. 2 of everything, depend on nothing, and he's right, of course. I moved up here from Fort Worth 12 years ago and given up trying to live with a girlfriend or a wife. I've gone through 3 of them, and the partings have always been wild and bitter, never pretty, always leaving great relief on either side after it was over. It's a rough country, and beauty doesn't do well up here unless it's something permanent, like the mountains or the river or even the great forest, centuries-old larch and cedar. Tom and Nancy have been together as long as anyone up here, though, so perhaps what he says is true. The mean hard-mouthed girl comes into town sometimes for a drink at the Dirty Shame, and whenever she comes in, Nancy gets up and leaves. The mean girl from Libya is named Wilmer, but Tom and everyone else calls her Tiger. She just turned 16 in the spring. She used to be 15 when she first started coming up here. It's a different country. I watched Nancy going out to the truck, walking proudly, not looking back whenever Tiger shows up. I really like Nancy. Nancy might be the best thing in this valley. She tans Tom's hides and pelts, helps him with his trap line. She's got long brown hair down almost all the way to her butt and a good strong face. She's from Illinois, but you'd swear Alaska. Nancy makes what she calls dream hoops for the entire valley, beautiful wreaths of bird feathers, feathers she's found and not killed to get. Grouse, eagle, crow, jay, owl. And the wreaths are small and thick, spiraling in on themselves, all feathers with only a finger-sized hole in the center. You're supposed to hang them over your bed, she says, right over your head, and all the bad dreams that would otherwise come to you in the night, making you anxious and tense the next day, instead get tangled up in the bird's feathers. The good dreams are free then to come in through the small hole. It works, strangely enough. Everyone agrees that it works. It's spooky. Tom says that in the absolute dead of winter, during the wolf moon of January, trees splitting, exploding like fireworks all over the valley, and deer and elk freezing, standing out in the bright white meadows like statues with no place left to go, just frozen finally from the great cold. He and Nancy will get so cabin fevered, so out of their minds and rage crazy that they could kill each other with swords if they had to. When they start feeling that rumble coming on, that low, slow kick in the back of their heads and between their ears, the itch starting up, then one of them will go lock the guns in the barn and throw the key into a snowdrift where it will not be found until spring thaw. And then, when their hate for each other and for everything, for the entrapment of the cabin, can no longer be stood, but when stepping outside might be fatal, lung-searing in a wind chill of 60 below, they put on these huge red inflatable child's boxing gloves. Rocky boppers, they are called. And with these monstrously oversized balloon-fisted gloves, they'll stand in front of the fire and just let each other have it, wailing away, pounding and pounding on each other. Fighting until they jabs and hooks and uppercuts, all of it, fighting for over an hour sometimes, fighting until they can't stand up. Collapsing then, exhausted as if drunk, in front of the fire, where they will fall asleep, into the deepest of sleeps, with a dream hoop over the mantel, until the fire dwindles and Tom must get up and take the balloon gloves off and go outside and get another log for the fire. Tom's a tough man, a little on the short side, but heavy, about 185 pounds. Still, I wouldn't like to be on his end of it when Nancy gets crazy, though I can hardly imagine it. I have to go by what Tom tells me, because she's taller than he is, has pretty good reach, and is in such good shape. I have to say that Tom isn't. I've been skiing with Nancy in December when the snow is still soft and fresh and the woods are silent and we're looking for feathers for her wreaths. And I can tell she has to hold back to keep from leaving me behind without even thinking about it. She's the best skier in the valley, and sometimes when I look out my breakfast room window, even if there is a heavy snow falling, I'll see her go trucking by with a determined, wild, happy look on her face and a Walkman strapped to her hip, lifting those skis and leaning forward and digging in with the poles, just flat out racing, jamming to her old 60s and 70s rock and roll, escaping the winter, escaping her love for Tom, escaping everything. Tom and I hunt in the fall, waiting for the snows to come down so he can run his trap line. He traps anything, everything, mink, beaver, badger, coyote, wolf, panther, bear. But in the fall, what we hunt is deer and grouse. We don't go after the elk anymore, which are still up so high and too hard to get to. Tom says he has a bad ticker, and perhaps he does, because he stops and rests often, even deer hunting, down in the low woods along the creeks. We do a lot of still hunting, where we sit camouflaged, waiting on a ridge for something to walk past below. Tom doesn't own a horse. He's through with them, says he's gotten them out of his system. He runs his trap lines on a snowmobile of all things, loud and obnoxious in the winter stillness, but he says it's faster, though not as dependable. It can't tell where the ice is too thin beneath the snow the way a horse can. He's ditched several into frozen streams that way, has barely gotten out alive, miles from home and 20 below with dark coming on, sopping wet. Galena Tom is the last tough man there is, for a fact. But it's because he's still got that boy in him, some part he flat out refuses to let go of. And so in the fall, when we shoot our deer, I'm the one who has to pack it out because of Tom's bad ticker and because he does not own a horse. He delights in shooting the biggest deer in the most remote places, places so far from the road that a helicopter with a winch cable couldn't get the deer out. And sometimes, for 2 or 3 days, we'll pack the deer out, me pulling a sled we've lashed together, dragging the clean deer out, Galena Tom walking beside me or behind, whistling, smoking his pipe, sauntering with his rifle strapped to his back, carrying a walking stick, out for a stroll. I'll be lunging up the hills, leaping forward in the harness we've fashioned for me, trying to get old Tom's big deer out of the woods. And he'll do his sharpshooting trick of knocking the heads off grouse as we come upon them on the trail, leaving them headless, spinning in the pine needles, fresh juicy meat for supper. And that's how we'll go through the woods, moving back down out of Canada, where the deer are larger and where there are no other hunters and no roads, a hell of a good place to get lost. And we'll finally work our way back to the one thin road that goes up above the Moy River, the one with the gate. We'll load up and turn around at the end of the road, about 10 miles into Canada, and drive back out, locking the gate behind us. Another trophy deer for Galena Tom aunts. Sometimes I get one also, though as I get older, I would rather pull only one deer instead of 2. One year, when I was 25, my strongest year, we got a moose as well as 2 deer. But now when we come across a moose in the woods, I shout and whistle and throw rocks at it before Tom can shoot. Even at 25, it took me a week to get the moose and those deer out of there. But we did get them out. Man, you're okay, Galena Tom says at the end of each sled pulling day. He's a good cook. Those grouse on sticks and potatoes on the coals, gravy from the deer meat poured over the potatoes and mashed. Tom knows all the names of the stars and constellations and the precise distance we are from each of them, unless he is making it up, which I do not think he is. He points out the stars, so many of them, with a branch, and tells me the distance in light years, as if he's been judging that particular star for a long time, wondering if he could somehow get there. He likes the trapping season best, and that's when he goes out alone, when everyone else, except Nancy, is trapped by the snow. We'll sit there so high in the Canadian Rockies and watch clouds pass over the moon, feel the bite of what feels like the edges of eternity, a certain forever aspect of things, as if this is the way it should always be up in this country. Frigid, locked in and cold, with springtime and yellow-flowered summer only an accident, which will, one year, not even bother happening. When we hunt, Galena Tom drinks whiskey in the evenings, telling me about those stars, and he tells me other things that no one else knows, maybe not even Nancy. Tom has a son, Buck, 19 years old, who's in the state prison in Choteau, a lifer, maximum security for killing a man. Buck is his son from a long-ago marriage, his only son. Buck's closer to my age than I am to Tom's. I don't know if Nancy knows about it or not. Somehow, I don't think she does. Tom doesn't talk about it much. Usually he just talks around the edges like, wonder what old Buck's doing tonight, or something like that. Or he'll talk about what it was like when he was 19 and 20, things he used to do, and all the things he's done since. He'll ask me some of the things I've done, some of the things I've seen. Not much, I'll feel like telling him, because it doesn't feel like much, not yet. That's part of the reason I hang around with Tom aunts. But I can't tell him that. I know it'll let him down. So instead, I'll tell him about brown trout I've caught in Idaho, doubling their size, and the amount of time it took to land them. I'll make up lies about all sorts of unbelievable things, and it's what we're supposed to talk about out there in the woods like that, and it seems to make Galena Tom feel both happy and sad, better in a way. And he laughs, looks over at me and laughs, and I think it even makes him be able to get to sleep. Hunting in a land where no one else can get to, bringing deer out of deep canyons and gorges that no one else could get them out of. I've still got my legs, my lower back. Those Octobers, those early Novembers, we can do anything. Galena Tom said once that he'd been thinking about breaking his son out of jail, but that was the only time he said that to me, never again, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I'd let him down by not volunteering or what. I don't know what I'd do if he brought it up again and asked me to help. I think that I would have to help him. What I believe is this, that when Tom was young, he spent a lot of time on the circuit trying to make it big and not enough time around the house. I think that he has had his fill of horses, that maybe he has made some kind of promise to himself about never getting on them again. I think maybe, too, that in the winter, when everyone else is trapped, bound by their cabins, he gets so far out into the woods in such a blowing wind that he forgets where he is, even who he is. I think he imagines he is his son, 20 years old, running the snowmobile along the frozen river, then stopping and getting off and walking up to his deadfall or his line set, pulling the chain up out of the frozen waters, his eyes tearing and blurring in the cold, lifting the chain up out there so far away from anyone where no one can see to find out if his luck has changed from yesterday and what lies ahead in the next trap and the next and the next. I've seen Galena Tom ride a moose before. Not showing off for anyone, unless it was just me. I was the only one with him. We were driving up the part of Hell Roaring Road where the old World War II asphalt ends from the logging days and it goes to weeds and dirt. Up above Peak Creek Road, up above everything, almost into Canada. And it was near the pass where you go over from Montana into Idaho. Tom was driving. We were looking for grouse, and we came upon this big bull moose standing in the middle of the road. He was taller than the truck, the largest I'd seen, with a spread of palm antlers as wide as a breakfast table. Tom had been talking about food, about his favorite recipes for grouse and for trout and everything. He was supposed to go into Libby and cook dinner for Tiger, was planning the menu, deciding what kind of wine to have with the meal. And this moose was suddenly in front of us, looking like he wanted to charge us, but turning instead and running down the road ahead of us like a blocker, clearing a path for us across the state line or something. And the moose wouldn't jump off the road, wouldn't veer to either side. Tom was gunning the truck. We were going 35, almost 40 miles an hour, right behind him. And Tom told me to take the wheel and the gas pedal and climbed out onto the roof before I could say anything. No one was around to see any of this. I couldn't understand why he was doing it. He gave me the thumbs up signal, and we pulled even with the big moose, racing alongside him, 40 miles an hour with his clumsy, hoof-floating gallop, and he looked fierce, angry, outraged. And that was before Tom leapt onto his back, like something falling from the sky. Tom clung to the big moose like a midget. The moose veered off the road and plowed through a bunch of low alder and fir, knocking Tom off. And then, like a bad bull in the rodeo, the moose came back up the hill, trying to gore Tom, to trample him. And I got the .30-30 out and was firing it into the air and honking the horn, but couldn't shoot the moose because Tom was in the way, running and scrambling, diving around rocks and rolling under logs, clutching his heart. The moose lost Tom then, somehow, and came after the truck, and I was free to shoot it then. But I did not want to shoot a moose out of season, and especially such a fine moose as this one, and I did not know what Tom wanted me to do, what he would have done. And so I did not fire, and the moose slammed into the side of the truck and shook it, rocked it on its springs, roaring and coughing like a bull, and then it ran back down into the woods and disappeared. I gave Tom some water and held his head up, propped him against a rock. The left side of his face was drawn down and twitching. He didn't have any color, and for a moment, broken and hurt like that, almost helpless, he seemed like my friend rather than a teacher of any sort. And he seemed young, too, like he could have been just anybody instead of Galena Tom Aunts who'd been thrown by a moose. And we sat there all afternoon, he with his eyes closed, resting up, saving up, breathing slowly with cracked ribs. It was only late summer and did not get dark until around 10 o'clock. By the time Tom finally felt strong enough for me to help him into the truck, A full, low moon had come up, and I did not know how to make the ride down the hell-roaring road any less rough, but I went as slow as I could and looked over to see how he was taking it. He didn't look to be in pain so much as just sick feeling, as if he had done something wrong, had made a mistake somewhere. "You're a good boy," he grunted when we finally got down off the road and back into the valley. I knew that in Libby, Tiger would be cursing him, maybe throwing things because he had not shown up. And I knew, too, that when we pulled up the driveway, with his truck battered and me getting out first, that Nancy would be frightened, that it would be like the worst of the dreams she never had. Fearing the worst, knowing about his heart, and knowing about Tom. We drove with the windows down and a cool breeze in our faces, all the pastures bathed in bright silver moonlight, and the mountains all around the valley like a wall, holding us in. The road sparkled and glittered in front of us, a path of where Tom had once been, a road one might encounter only in a dream. It was a road he had helped make, and we flew across it, rushing to get home. Thank you all. Again, such a lovely audience to hang in here on this day, the end of a long grind of lit. Congratulations. Thank you all again for having me out here. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any about.
Please wait for the microphone.
Oh yeah, sure. Writing and environmental stuff, Montana stuff, anything.
I'm just curious about your multitasking. You seem to be
Very
editing
long
while you're
time.
Oh, the questions about multitasking and my editing. Well, yeah, there's a lot of fixes and tweaks. I mean, you can read a story 100 times and it's still just little things are going to be wrong. It's weird. Yeah, no, it just never ends. It wasn't bad stuff, just little tiny little things. Not. But sometimes you'll find some stuff that really, but that was several years ago. This has been pretty cleaned up. Yes?
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if those images kind of reflect modern encounter with nature, losing some kind of basic encounter with nature that modern man can't live in nature like we used to.
The question was about some surreal images and if I understand, paraphrasing it, if there's some separation from nature in more recent times than in older times, I can't. I don't think so. I mean, I can't speak to what was here in the old days or the way back, but I think if we put ourselves out in the woods, stuff will happen. I think it's more a function that we're not out in the woods much, so we don't see stuff happen. But I think it's still going on out there. When I'm out there, way out there, I see stuff and stuff that I'll hear myself telling stories to people, like an old person saying, "I saw this one time." Well, yeah, once in my long life I saw it, but it's fantastic stuff. But that's a whole lifetime of walking to see that happen once, But you see a lot of stuff once. Yeah, I don't think it's changed. I think we just separated physically from our environment. Yes, have you got the mic? Or go ahead.
It's fine. I was in the Yak in 2000, around there when the fires started. And I know that it was one of the last places where the fires
Right.
got the best of us. I know how much it means to you, and I just would like you to talk a little bit about how the Yak's doing.
Yeah, the Yak is doing pretty darn well. We don't get enough fire up there. Fire is really good for that country. It grew up with fire, and that's what sculpted and shaped it. It's been fire suppressed for for 100 plus years. And it's a real active dynamic up there, and that's going to be a reckoning that'll be coming, in coming years. But as you alluded, the Yak is one of the wettest, greenest places in Montana. It'll be one of the last places where the fires, the increasing warming world does extend and reach, and hopefully it'll reach in fingers and tendrils and not, cataclysmic single event fires. But if that's what happens, that's what happens too. It's an incredible landscape, very low elevation, metamorphic, more so than igneous, and not very glaciated either. It's very Appalachian, very much like the Eastern Mountains in some regard. A real anomaly out there. Just beautiful shapes to the hills and mountains. And I'm working with a nonprofit group out there, the Yak Valley Forest Council, to help convince the Forest Service, the dominant land management agency up there, to do the right thing on their prescriptions. And it's not always an easy discussion, but we're doing good work, and we're trying to protect as wilderness the last roadless lands up there. We have a great bill in the Senate. The House is jamming it up, but we're going to keep pushing and try and find a way to make it happen. Anybody interested in the Yak, please do go online and check out our work and jump in and help us. It's a cool organization, a little grassroots group. No electricity, no running water, outhouse for our executive director. It's a tough gig. Everybody just loves the Yak and is working hard to protect it. It's a great place. Thanks. Yes.
Is Galena Tom a person you actually know, or based on a real person?
No, the character of Galena Tom, I don't know. There are a lot of really rank folks up there, and it's kind of an amalgam of some people's best and some people's worst, and there's all that up there and more for sure. Yeah, but no singular person.
With Galena on the road and everything, that hasn't really happened. It would be beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Not yet.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your writing and your activism and how they work together, how they inform each other. I loved your stories. They were just both wonderfully rich and full of a sense of the land. And so I really appreciate that. But would love to hear more about how the storytelling part of you and the issue activist part of you work together, live together.
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks. I'm trying to, keep a firewall between the two, because when you're writing a story, it's like a gift. You have a story to tell. You want to give something to somebody. Like, I want to tell you this story that you're not going to believe what happened. Here's this, and it is like something you're giving. When you're doing activist work, you're trying to get something from that same person, saying, I need your help. I need you to help the Yak. I need you to help 350.org. I need you to stop Keystone. I need you to do this. And it's a much more direct and taking instead of giving. So that the two, I try to keep them separate in my mind. I also think we're, as activists and environmentalists and just residents of the world, we're so burned out with donor fatigue and just you can only run on adrenaline so long. And then sometimes you just want a really good story to just kind of chill out and feel the senses engage again, which is what art is supposed to do. And that in its own way can be almost activist based to, if you can buck the troops back up to feel good about the world, and then they'll have a little pep in their step to go out and hit Exxon in the teeth or something. So that there is crossover, but I try and keep it separate, but you can't keep it entirely separate, but I try hard, because the worst thing for a piece of fiction is to have a vendetta, a cause. The best thing for fiction is to not know where you're going and to follow it, and to sometimes even work against your predisposition, and so that then you arrive at a place you arrive at the terminus with surprise that is communicated simultaneously to the reader. Whereas if you know in the back of your mind how it's going to turn out or what the takeaway is going to be, you can't hide that from the best readers. They'll know what's up, and they'll sense it, they'll taste it, they'll smell it, and that's no good to my way of thinking.
How much time do you spend outside? out, or?
Not enough. I don't. The question was how much time do I spend outside? Not, in my mind I'm outside all the time, but days pass where if I go out and get wood from the wood pile, and that's about it. Yeah. So, not enough. None of us do. It's that horrible thing or that funny thing. Nobody ever wants on their headstone to say, "Damn." Nobody's going to have on their headstone, "Damn, I wish I'd spent more time at the office." But again and again, I keep going back to the office. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me not to.